If the price of oil is down low, we get a tax off that gas usage that we invest into our roads and highways. We need to build those roads for critical infrastructure. If the price of oil is high, we're very happy as a government to take the additional royalties from a high price barrel of oil and give the break to the consumers in Alberta on the gasoline tax.
I'm Associate for Rebel News. If you're like me, you have very likely noticed that your utility and electricity bills, well, they keep on going up. That's nothing new. But what is new is these constant alerts we seem to be getting over the last few months indicating that there is tension on the power grid or that there will be potential brownouts. That's not something that I remember growing up. And the combined factor of increased costs and this new grid instability that people are dealing with is understandably causing a bit of concern for some Albertans. So I was fortunate to be joined by Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Neudorf, to address some of the causes and some of the things that are being done to address not only instability, but the costs associated with paying for utilities.
Our goal is to ensure that Alberta's electricity grid is reliable, affordable, and sustainable for future generations to come. In fact, I was tasked with this in my mandate letter from the Premier. As a Minister of Affordability and Utilities, I regularly hear from Albertans about how expensive their utility bills have gotten. It's not uncommon for my constituents to actually bring me their bills. I've also heard that many concerns surrounding our grid's reliability, much like the Premier mentioned, was highlighted during last month's cold snap and the subsequent emergency alert. Listening to Albertans is our government's top priority.
The sort of notion of these grid alerts, power shortages, the fear of brownouts, that seems to be on the increase. It's not something that I remember quite as frequently. What's the sort of motivating or driving factor behind that? Why is that happening?
Sure. Yeah, our grid volatility has definitely increased over the past few years. And there's a number of factors for that. But one is the rapid pace of renewables coming online in Alberta. Renewables they're not the enemy, but they do have unique characteristics that they're intermittent. The wind doesn't blow the same consistency all day long. It gusts and eases off and those kind of things. The sun is shining at different intensities, cloud cover comes and goes. And what that means is the electrons generated go up and down with the weather. And that means other dispatchable generation, typically natural gas or sometimes storage of different types, hydro or battery, have to sort of make up and balance that out because one electron in must equal one electron out. So that volatility makes that harder and harder to do it all the time. And then the only time that we've had a brownout recently was April 14th, when we had that grid alert and some brownouts. What happened that day, again, where everybody's watching the weather in electricity now, It was supposed to be windy. It didn't. The wind didn't show up. It wasn't windy. And then a natural gas plant that was there for backup, when they went to switch on, it tripped and wasn't able to generate for about an hour. Right. And then that means that you've got a shed load. That means that people using electricity get turned off from using electricity because we don't have enough to feed their need. And that's what we get rolling brownouts. And the policy in Alberta is that you can only have no power for a maximum of 30 minutes. And then they go to another region and they don't touch hospitals or essential services, those kind of things. Okay. And we're in a good space now. We have more dispatchable generation coming online right now and throughout this year, so that we're now in a surplus situation, and those kind of events are significantly less likely to happen.
So sort of getting ahead of themselves a little bit on renewables may have sort of contributed to that situation. Now, that's on the production side. Has sort of large numbers of people immigrating to Alberta, electric cars coming online. Like, are there other factors on the consumption side that are contributing to these situations as well?
Certainly, and we've got a lot to learn. That's called demand side. That's where we're using electricity. Demand side management is something that we haven't yet utilized in Alberta. We are doing planning more and more to bring that in and make that beneficial to Albertans. That it would include things like time of use rates. So in the peak hours, the less you use, the lower your bill will be. We need to do that. Right now, we have pretty much flat rates right throughout the day. And industry is the largest consumer of electricity in Alberta. A big industry, manufacturing, that kind of stuff. That's about 85% of our consumption of electricity is that side. Residential and light commercial usage is only about 15%.
Okay.
So people moving to Alberta does have an impact, and we do want to make sure that they benefit from good utilization. But we also have to think of our really big consumers in industry and manufacturing to make sure that they're set up well, because they need that consistent power quite often 24 hours a day.
So when you mentioned that sort of sounds like surge pricing to me when you're talking about prices going up at demand periods. Would that apply, like a cold day in the middle of winter, everyone hits a peak time as residential people? That's kind of outside of your control. Or are you saying that would apply exclusively to businesses?
We're looking at both aspects of the market. We want to make sure that we offer products that work for both. Industry is much more consistent. When they turn all their big equipment on, they're using the same power draw 24/7, doesn't matter on weekends and that kind of stuff. So we obviously, they're very in tune with the overall price, and they want consistency. But we think for residential, we learned a lot from January 13th, where we sent out the emergency alert and we asked people to turn off what they could turn off. Well, we dropped 100 megawatts, which is the equivalent of 120,000 houses in a minute. Yeah. And then another megawatt in the next 4 minutes. And there was a hockey game on and it was really cold. So people didn't turn off their TVs or their furnaces, but they certainly turned off excess lights. Yeah. So we think that could have been 500,000 houses. They did something, and we're very, very grateful for that. That's demand side management. What if we all did that a little bit more regularly? And that would be really good for our grid. We don't have to build a whole lot of generation. We can just conserve our consumption. The reason why people don't do that now is you can go around, turn all the lights off in your house, and at the end of the month, maybe you save $3. Well, that's not enough incentive to do any of that. But if we said, listen, if you pay attention, particularly for those who are on fixed incomes or are struggling to make ends meet because they're just in between jobs or whatever the case may be, if they were able to save $20, $30, $50 a month because they were very careful with their energy consumption, we think that we should reward them for that good behavior.
Now, on another front here, many were upset when the fuel tax reappeared. Now, I understand that's indexed to oil barrel prices, so it's not as though the UCP brought something new in. But with concerns with federal carbon tax increases, massive cost of living increases, many people thought that might be a place where the government of Alberta could actually help people get by and afford. Can you discuss the decision not to sort of hold that off?
Yeah, we still want to. That program is still in place. The first quarter of this year, the average price for a barrel of oil was about $78.74, something like that, just below that $80 threshold. Now we're into the second quarter of the year, and on July 1st, it'll be reevaluated for that average. We have been right to date above that $80, somewhere probably around $83 a barrel, which means that the first step of that tax relief will be in effect, and it'll be in effect for the second or the third quarter as we go through that. So that is still there. The reason why we did it that way, to still have it indexed as part of it, is because if the price of oil is down low, we get a tax off that gas usage that we invest into our roads and highways. We need to build those roads for critical infrastructure. If the price of oil is high, we're very happy as a government to take the additional royalties from a high price barrel of oil and give the break to the consumers in Alberta on the gasoline tax. So we're just asking people to understand that we need to invest in infrastructure. That cost is there all year long. We're happy to get it from different places pending that price of oil. And if we can pass that savings on to Alberta, we will, definitely. And the higher the price goes on the barrel of oil, the more of a return that they get, up until 100% of that gasoline tax if it's over $90 a barrel.
Now, the city of Calgary brought in $186 million more than expected this past year, a big surplus. Despite that, taxes went up, all of these things. But one of the things that falls directly under your sort of purview is this local access fee. And first, if you don't mind explaining it, but just for folks out there who don't know, Calgarians are paying about 3 times what Edmonton is. And it's not a massive sum, but it's about $240 instead of, say, $80, which adds up. So what is that, and how come Calgarians are paying so much more?
Sure. So a local access fee is what the municipality, in this case Calgary, charges to its residents through its utility, which is NMAX in Calgary, for the use of that infrastructure, right? And what's different about Calgary is they have a 2-stage formula. So they charge 11% on transmission and distribution, and then they charge another 11% on the regulated rate option. And when that regulated rate option went up, Calgarians ended up paying a lot more, $245 on average per person. But there were some businesses that paid, I think, $400,000 over the course of the year just for that local access fee. Wow. And then they put that onto their products that they're selling to Calgarians and Albertans. We asked them last fall to look at this and say, we need you to adjust that formula. They sort of kicked the can down the road. Then they said they did decide to change it, but not until 2027. We felt that wasn't immediate enough for Albertans and Calgarians. We said, no, here's how we think is fair to calculate that fee. You can do this in Calgary. They do it everywhere else. And we didn't want anybody else in the meantime to say, well, if Calgary made a windfall profit on a high rate of electricity, shouldn't we do that as well? So we just wanted to say, no, that is not the appropriate way to do this. We're going to bring that in. We're going to make it apply, should the bill pass, on January 1st of 2025. And that cost stability for Calgarians should be measurably appreciated in the years upcoming.
Well, Minister Neudorf, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And for everyone at home, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. Radical environmental policies are hurting Albertans, whether it be through driving up costs massively or destabilizing our grid with irresponsible environmental policies. It has to stop. If you agree, sign our petition at nogreenreset.com.